The Ancient One, deceased. Real name, unknown. Occupation, former Sorcerer Supreme, former Master of Mystic Arts. Legal status, unknown. Former aliases, the Master. Place of birth, Kamar Taj, Tibet. Place of death, the crypts of Ka-U, Tibet. Known survivors, none. First appearance, Strange Tales number 111. Final appearance, as a corporeal being, Marvel Premiere number 10. History. The youth who would eventually be called the Ancient One was born over 500 years ago in Kamar Taj, a village in a hidden land in the Himalaya mountains in the area now known as Tibet. Originally, the youth, like the other men of the village, was a peaceful farmer. However, an older fellow villager named Kaluwu somehow gained certain magical knowledge which he shared with the youth. Kaluwu and the youth began exploring the secrets of sorcery together and learned how to harness mystical energy for their own uses. However, their motives were quite different. Kaluwu intended to build a vast empire, while the youth wished to use sorcery to benefit his fellow villagers. While the youth continued his studies, Kaluwu slowly used his sorcery to influence the villagers' minds. Eventually, Kaluwu and the youth together cast a spell that eliminated disease, poverty, and suffering from Kamar Taj and granted its people immortality. Shortly thereafter, the people of Kamar Taj, responding to Kaluwu's magical influence on their minds, crowned him as their king. For over a year, Kaluwu organized the men of Kamar Taj into an army of conquest, while slowly increasing his magical control over the minds of the people of Kamar Taj so that they became no more than his placid puppets. The youth attempted to warn the villagers about Kaluwu, but Kaluwu's magic prevented them from heeding him. Kaluwu struck the youth from behind with a mystical bolt which paralyzed him. Then Kaluwu had his soldiers conquer a neighboring village and reduce its people to slavery. While Kaluwu plotted further conquests and the people of Kamar Taj fell into decadence, the paralyzed youth, whom Kaluwu had placed in the public square as an object of ridicule, mentally called upon mystical forces to defeat Kaluwu. However, the youth was not yet a full master of the mystic arts, and, although he did not intend it, the mystic forces he summoned created a pestilence that wiped out virtually the entire population of Kamar Taj. Kaluwu fled to another dimension. He was defeated by Dr. Strange centuries later. With Kaluwu gone, the youth was freed from his paralysis. Ironically, Kaluwu's spell had protected the youth from the full effect of the mystical pestilence. The youth was no longer immortal, but he would now age at a very slow rate, so that he would not reach the end of his lifespan for 5 centuries. Because of what he had witnessed in Kamar Taj, the youth left the village in order to devote his life to combating other evil sorcerers. To this end, the youth sought out an ancient order of sorcerers whose elder members were known as Ancient Ones, and which was dedicated to protecting Earth's people from black magic. The youth continued his mystical studies with them and rapidly became far more skilled in sorcery than his colleagues. His prowess was so great that he was sought out by the dying Sorcerer Supreme of the Earth Dimension and presented with the Amulet of Agamotto, the Earth Dimension's very first Sorcerer Supreme. The amulet enabled its possessor to protect his or her dimension from the sinister extra-dimensional entity known as Dormammu. See, Dormammu. And using it, the man who became known as the Ancient One kept Dormammu out of the Earth Dimension for nearly 5 centuries, although he never succeeded in entirely defeating Dormammu. Through this and other feats, the man who became known as the Ancient One became recognized as the Sorcerer Supreme of the Earth Dimension. The Ancient One further increased his knowledge even within the last century by traveling back in time to ancient Babylonia, defeating the Griffin whom the priests of the Babylonian god Marduk had set guard over the Book of the Vishanti, and thus obtaining the book, the greatest known source of white magical knowledge. Within the last several decades, the Ancient One, who had outlived all the other members of his order, was approached by Baron Karl Mordo of Transylvania. See Baron Mordo, who wished to become his pupil. The Ancient One was nearing the end of his long life and realized he needed a successor. Although he recognized Mordo's evil ambitions, he also sensed Mordo's talent for sorcery, and he decided that he could at best convert Mordo to the service of good, and at worst, keep him in check. Sometime later, a gifted but somewhat amoral surgeon, Stephen Strange, sought out the Ancient One to cure his hands, which had been injured in an automobile accident in a way that prevented him from holding his surgeon's tools with the complete steadiness that was necessary to perform surgery. While staying at the Ancient One's palace in the Himalayas, Strange learned that Mordo was plotting against the Ancient One. Mordo placed a spell upon Strange which prevented him from warning the Ancient One about Mordo, but the Ancient One freed Strange of the spell and assured him that he was aware of Mordo's evil nature. Having witnessed the power of good and evil magic in action, Strange found a new, higher purpose in life and became the Ancient One's disciple. Mordo left the Ancient One's tutelage sometime afterwards to embark on his career of evil. Dr. Strange, on the other hand, remained with the Ancient One for years, proved to be highly talented in the mystic arts, and eventually became the Ancient One's successor as Sorcerer Supreme. See Dr. Strange. Some years after Dr. Strange had left the Ancient One's palace to return to New York City, the Ancient One and Dr. Strange fought the powerful demon Zom at Stonehenge in Britain. Knowing that he could not long withstand Zom's power at his advanced age, the Ancient One made it appear as if Zom had killed him by fusing his body with one of the Stonehenge monoliths. As he seemed to die, the Ancient One claimed to transfer his magical abilities to Dr. Strange. Instead, the Ancient One actually activated potential for further magical ability in Dr. Strange that had until then remained latent. Zom was imprisoned by the Living Tribunal, see Living Tribunal, and the Ancient One, still in possession of his powers, was reunited with Dr. Strange some days later. The Ancient One then entered full retirement, allowing Dr. Strange to assume his position as Sorcerer Supreme. Years later, the Ancient One was taken prisoner by the so-called Living Buddha and minor demons called the Shadow Men, all of whom served the extra-dimensional demon Shuma-Gorath. They intended to use his waning power to open the way to Earth for the demon. The Ancient One retained enough consciousness to mystically make his own mind the only conduit through which the demon could travel. Knowing that he had long outlived his natural lifespan, the Ancient One prompted his disciple Dr. Strange to kill him by destroying that portion of his mind which constitutes his ego or sense of self. With the Ancient One's brain shut down, Shuma-Gorath was trapped in the dead mind forever. With his body dead, the Ancient One's astral form was set free, and the aged mage willed it to become one with the physical universe. The Ancient One has harnessed his still potent magical energy to reappear on the earthly plane on 2 separate occasions. The first time, he manifested himself as an avatar, or discrete aspect, of eternity, the sentient organism of the universe. The second time, he regained corporeal form against his will when the evil creators caused the universe to reject him. This drove the Ancient One mad for a time, but he has since resumed his mystic unity with the physical universe. Height, 5 feet 11 inches. Weight, 160 pounds. Eyes, blue. Hair, bald. Powers. The powers of the Ancient One, while he was a living human, were the same that Dr. Strange now possesses. See Dr. Strange. However, in his extreme old age, the Ancient One was unable to perform major feats of sorcery without placing great physical strain upon himself.